Hey folks, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be doing another quillon dagger build, but this one is going to have some pretty impressive damascus. I'll be doing this as a collaboration with my buddy Rick Hall. Let's get into it. I'll be making some of the damascus at my shop and bringing that to Rick's shop. Here I'm starting with the sunset. I made a 3D printed mold I'm going to fill with powdered steel and put it in a canister and weld it up. Now it's time to get this canister in the forge, let it soak for a good long while. This thing is 3 inches across, so it's going to take a long time to heat up. We got to make sure we forge this equally on all sides so we don't distort the sun. I missed videoing it, but I took the canister off and here we are now squaring it up, compressing it even more. This is all we're going to do with the sun for now. I'll take it to Rick's place and we'll finish it off there. To make things go faster at Rick's place, I'm going to be forging this piece of damascus at home. Let's do that. Here I've got a stack of 25 layers of alternating 1084 and 15N20 steels. We're going to forge weld these together, draw them out, and then restack them because we need about 100 layers. I've got this billet just about where I want it. Now we're going to just take it to the flat dies, get it all nice and flat, make sure the corners are nice and square, and cut it up and get ready for a restack. Here we are after the restack. I ended up cutting up into 5 pieces, so we're going to be at about 125 layers. Once I get to Rick's place, remember our billet is going to look like this. I'm doing the top section, he's doing the bottom, so they need to mate up. So we agreed the dimensions would be 2 inches by 10 inches. Mine is going to be ½ an inch thick, and his is going to be 1 inch thick. I'm here at Rick Hall's shop, my buddy Rick Hall, fellow journeyman bladesmith. We're going to do a cool pattern today.
Yes.
I think we're calling it Ocean Sunset.
Ocean Sunset.
We're going to be able to make this happen?
I think so. If we're lucky. A little bit of heat, a little bit of meat.
We have this beautiful power hammer to play with. I'm quite excited about that one. All right, let's get it done.
And we'll get her done.
Here's all the pieces to our starting billet. My steel, Rick's steel, and a piece of nickel to go in the middle. Looking back, I wish we would have reconsidered putting this weld all the way down the sides. This ended up giving us a bit of a pain grinding out later. Rick has a 50-ton press. It did a good job of setting the welds on this billet. In order to draw out the billet, we moved to the big blue power hammer. Rick started out and gave me a demo. We need to go from this down to this.
This is Dennis' first time on a power hammer. Came pretty natural to him since he has done so much forge welding under the press.
Now that we got the billet drawn out to what we need, it's time to put in the C's. So here Rick is knocking in the corners and making it look like this. Now we're pressing down on the billet to give us our C's.
Here's Dennis doing what he does best and what I hate doing the most.
Here we are at the first restack. You sure can see those strips of nickel.
Here we are repressing after a restack. We only hit it one time to make sure that we have a good weld. That keeps you from moving it around too much, which could cause separation.
Now that we got the restack forge welded, we're back to the power hammer to draw it down to something like this. Now we're back to the press just to flatten it out and square up the corners to get ready for the next restack. Here's a shot of what it looks like inside. Here we are stacked up again, ready to go back in the forge. Now our billet looks like this.
If you get a little rhombus, you want to correct it right away. Keep it from getting too out of hand.
Here we are again, back at the power hammer. Drawing it out, we're going to end up with a billet like this. We need a 1-inch square, so we move to the squaring dies just to get this nice and square and flat. Here you can see the progression of what we did today. This is the end of day 1 at Rick's shop. You guessed it, it's time to have a beer. Here we are back at it the next morning. We've cut up that 1-inch bar into 5 pieces, stacked it up tall, and now we're going to forge weld that together. Now Rick is pressing this on an angle to purposely put a rhombus into the billet. That's going to make those waves kind of have an angle to them. It'll look cool, just wait. Now we're cutting off those edges that we rhombused, and then we're going to cut this billet in half so we can mirror it and forge it back together.
Here's what happens when you run out of propane on your big bottle. Got to put it in water to keep it from freezing.
Now we're going to work on that sun a little bit. Rick and I decided we wanted some extra steel on the top of the sun to use as the tang because we didn't want to deform any of the rays. So here we're forge welding some extra steel on top. And now finally our last forge weld. We're forging the sunset to the ocean.
This is a very tricky weld, going horizontal and vertical at the same time.
Well, folks, we're all done. I'm really happy with the billet. I think it looks amazing. You guys will see the glamour shots in a little bit. But thanks so much, Rick, for having me at the shop.
Wonderful having you.
It's been super fun. We had a few trials and tribulations.
You always do, you know. If you're not working through mistakes, you're not a knife maker.
That's right. All about problem solving, folks. I always say that. Yeah. But I think you guys would be impressed with the billet. I'm I'm really happy with it, and I can't wait to see what you make out of yours.
Yeah, it's definitely a different billet, different than anything I've ever done. Stepped out of my comfort zone a little bit. Dennis has a way of making you do that for the betterment.
It's been a fun experience, and thanks so much for having me.
You bet, man. Anytime.
All right, we're going to do it again.
Okay.
All right.
All right, folks, now that we got this beautiful piece of Damascus, the sun is going to appear right here. So right about there. I'm going to draw this out, which is nice because this is super fine. So I'll draw this out the length of the dagger, and the black part is just going to become the tang. Let's get to forging. I'm starting by forging the tang. I want to get that all drawn out before I start drawing out the blade. Now that I have the tang forged out, I want to lengthen the blade, but just the part below the sun. I'll explain why in a little bit. Before I get it drawn out too much and I get the blade too thin, I want to fish mouth it. I do this so that after I forge it back together, it looks like this. That will make sure the nickel meets before the tip. It just looks really cool that way and ensures we have no nickel on the edge. After a couple heats, I've got the fish mouth forged back together, and now I just start drawing it out to the shape I want. Now it's back to the rolling mill to stretch out that blade even longer. Because of the way this pattern looks, it really has to be fully forged. There can't be any stock removal because it'll just ruin the pattern and it won't be symmetrical. I'm just doing some final flattening in the press, and I should be pretty much done the forging session for this dagger. Here we are after forging. Pretty much the shape I want. You'll notice that it's really thick here, and that's because I didn't want to distort the sun, so I didn't want to draw it out this way. So I left this pretty thick, and we're just going to grind this off. Now I get to use my big surface grinder. So I did a little test etch. Looks pretty cool. If you guys can see that. So put the pattern on the other side. Now we're just going to grind to the profile. Here's the finished profile. It's nice and symmetrical. I got some layout lines drawn. Now we're going to do some bevels. So here it is after initial grinding. I think the bevels are pretty even. I mean, they're not perfect, but it's just pre-heat treat. As long as I got the same amount off each side and the center line's pretty much centered, it shouldn't warp. All right, I'm going to do another normalization cycle just to be sure, and then let's get it quenched. So here we are so far. I did the final grinds and just fixed it up a little bit with a file here and sanded the ricasso to 800 because now it's time to fit our guard so we can get started on that. And I'll go back and sand the blade later. So let's get to the guard. So here's the guard. I know it looks goofy, but it will eventually get ground like this. What I wanted to make sure of was that we had the slot and we had this piece here, which actually you can see it's even going to be a little more pronounced than what's in the picture. So we got this fit up. I'm going to leave that for now and move on to the spacer. So here is the guard so far. I did the profiling in one plane, but I haven't contoured it this way. It fits really nicely, snug. I still have to bed the tang in here, but what I need to do is, and you saw me make this on the lathe, so here we are so far with the guard. I'm pretty happy with it. Got the pins in place. So that's pretty nice. Now it's time to turn our attention to the handle. So this is going to be the handle material. Very impressed with this. I've had this for quite a while from my buddy Oleg at knife-wood.com. So I think this is going to just really set off this knife. So we're going to mark the center here. Actually going to take my little iris, draw a circle on this, and then we're going to turn it on the lathe.
Although this made a real mess of my lathe, it's really rewarding and I love doing this step.
The powder from this looks like a mac and cheese packet. I bet it doesn't taste as good. So I got all this done on the lathe, and now I've got it rigged up in my little spinning system here, and this is to put a grid system on it to get ready for the wire inlay and the spiral flutes. So now I've just taken a marker and I've kind of connected all the corners of the grid, and that gives us our spiral flutes. So there's where I'm at with the spiral fluting. I just wasn't totally thrilled with like this big flat part. I called up Rick and said, hey, what do you think? Maybe I'll do another flute here. And I said, oh, maybe I don't want to do that. And he said, don't be lazy. All right, so I've got the black wire for the inlay kind of tied up to this drill and then way over there in the vise, and now we're gonna spin it. So here's our polished and buffed handle, and here's the wire. So we're going to be placing this in those little channels. So let's go do that.
Travis Haynes over at Bird Forge gave me some of his pelican paste wax, and that's what I used to treat this handle. Worked out really well. There's a link down in the description. Now it's time to do all the hand sanding on the blade. Then I'm going to etch it and hot black the fittings. Now it's time to show you guys the final product.